The man asked the couple if they vowed to love each other and stay together through sorrow and joy. The main character, Leisel, noted that the wedding felt disturbingly real. Her husband turned to her expectantly. When she didn't respond right away, the man officiating asked Leisel why she was silent. Embarrassed, she hesitated, while the boy beside her watched her with a happy, eager expression. In the end, she swore the vow. Afterward, the officiant said they could exchange rings to symbolize their union in the name of the goddess Armacon. With that, he declared them husband and wife. And just like that, Leisel had gone through with it. She felt like a greedy woman, because she had married him purely for money. At last, the ceremony ended. Her maid, noticing how exhausted she looked, offered her a cup of tea. Leisel practically begged her to bring it quickly, so the maid hurried off, asking for just a minute. Weddings, after all, were exhausting. Leisel had only invited close relatives, so she wouldn't say the celebration dragged on, but she was still tired to death. She couldn't help thinking, I didn't expect it to turn out this way at all. The grand banquet hall, the luxurious dress, the jewelry. Everything was lavish, perfect, and fake. As fake as the marriage itself. Yet to the world, he was still Duke Chester Hyos, the most powerful and wealthy man in the empire. It saddened her that she'd even had to involve her parents. She wasn't sure this year would go smoothly. Someone knocked. "Come in," Leisel said automatically. She told the maid to leave the tea on the table. She'd drink it later. But then, a man's voice answered from the other side of the door, startling her. Lester stood there, wearing only a robe. Lizelle blinked, confused and alarmed. Why was he here? And more importantly, why was he almost completely naked? She told him bluntly to get dressed. But Chester simply said that, as her husband, he had the right to spend the night with her. Leisel was horrified. Then she laughed nervously, assuming it must be a joke, a strange, awkward joke about spending the night with her. But Chester didn't seem to understand what was funny. This was their wedding night, after all. Leisel was stunned. Was he serious? When Chester began approaching her, she backed away and asked him to stop. "What kind of wedding night is this?" she demanded. "We didn't agree to anything like this." Bezen. He replied simply, "We're married, of course we will." Then, as if trying to be considerate, he asked if she needed time to think it over. Leisel didn't want him coming near her with that intense expression. None of this made any sense. But Chester reached out to kiss her. Then he whispered something outrageous. "Don't even dream of sleeping tonight." Leisel was speechless. There had been nothing in the contract about this. It had all started 3 months ago. Her father had asked for more time to pay the Duke what he owed. Chester had already waited those 3 months and said he wouldn't wait any longer. Leisel's father had sworn there would be money next time. As well as I understood, otherwise touchbacks were free to do as he wished. After that, the man paused to think, then said that if there was no money, the debt would have to be repaid. With the Baron's daughter. Leisel had no idea what was happening. Her father hadn't believed his daughter could truly be at stake, but the man made it clear. If the Baron didn't want his daughter involved, he needed to repay the debt. Otherwise, he would do whatever he pleased. Reluctantly, the man gave the Baron 2 more months. The Baron tried to stop him, but the man had already turned away, leaving with his servants. Shaken, the Baron turned to Leisel and said he was deeply ashamed of himself. He begged her forgiveness. But Leisel simply turned to him and said there was no need to worry. Nothing terrible would happen. There was still time. Her father rushed to her and, trying to believe her words, told her she was right. He asked her to trust him and promised that he would never hand her over to anyone. Leisel smiled weakly and said she believed him. She would go to her room. He agreed, saying she was probably a bit shaken and needed to rest. Later, the Baron asked his wife if she'd noticed how calmly their daughter had behaved. The Baroness nodded and said their daughter had grown up. Leisel, however, didn't understand just how bad things really were. Her parents' reactions made that clear. They'd probably have to sell the house. And truthfully, she hated Leisel. Because the main character isn't really Leisel. She was just a girl who had fallen asleep reading a novel, and when she woke up, she had somehow become Leisel, a spoiled noble girl in a book called Frozen. She hadn't even cared about this character. Lizelle had been a background figure to her. But now she was trapped in her body. And the real problem was how selfish and indulgent Lizelle had been. Her demands had pushed her family deep into debt. In the end, almost all their property had been taken. The worst part? The original Leisel had lived in luxury, enjoyed every bit of her wealth, and now the main character was left to deal with the consequences. She was frustrated. Why did she have to clean up this mess? Still, there was no point in whining now. She needed money, and fast. She looked around. The room was filled with expensive junk, dresses, jewelry, accessories. It was probably worth something. She decided to sell as much as she could. She started gathering everything that might fetch a price, though she had no idea what it would all be worth. She'd have to ask the butler to sell it. When she told him, the butler was stunned. He asked how much she hoped to get. She replied that she didn't know. The things were second-hand, after all, but she had to try. Moved, the butler teared up. He couldn't believe the lady was doing all this to help her father. After 20 years of service, he said it was the first time he'd felt so proud of her. She was touched, but not enough to hug him. Instead, she told him she was going for a walk. She didn't think she'd be able to raise the full 80 million, and time was short. 2 months was too little. Things were looking bleak. If only money would fall from the sky, Leisel muttered. Just as she was thinking about how to get the money, a piece of paper smacked her in the face. Annoyed, she looked up and grumbled, "If you're going to throw something, Lord, at least make it cash, not paper." Still, curiosity got the better of her, and she unfolded the paper. It was a wanted poster. For a missing 5-year-old boy. The reward? A staggering 100 million. Immediately, Lizelle remembered. Lapel was the main character of the novel she had read. This must be the time in the story when he disappeared. She practically lit up with joy. "Thank the heavens there's no law in this world against improving the life of a time traveller," she whispered to herself. After all, she knew exactly where he was. Her memory was sharp. This was her golden opportunity. She set out at once, eyes gleaming at the thought of that reward. "Maybe he's in this pile," she muttered, rummaging through a large bag of trash. But it was just that. Garbage, food waste, rotten and smelly beyond belief. "The smell is divine," she muttered dryly, holding her breath. "I really need to get out of this dump." But Leisel was a measured flower, as she liked to call herself, and a measured flower does not curse, no matter how foul the stench. She pressed on. 100 million shillings is no joke, she said. "I will find him. Even if I have to swim through 100 rivers of garbage, I will not go back to being the beggar I once was." Her clothes were already torn from the mountains of filth she had waded through, but she kept searching. Then, suddenly, she heard a rustling behind her. She froze, straining to listen. Had she imagined it? Carefully, she crept toward the sound. And there he was, a small boy emerging from a pile of garbage. He had black hair and striking red eyes, just like the description on the poster. He looked up at her and, in a hoarse voice, called her Mum. Leisel's heart stopped. She'd found him. She had actually found the boy worth 100 million shillings. She touched his forehead. Burning hot. Without a moment's hesitation, she scooped him up and ran straight to her estate. Her parents were horrified when they saw her enter, filthy and clutching a strange child. "I'll explain everything later," she panted. Call the doctor, now." The physician arrived quickly. After examining the boy, he reported that the child was suffering from extreme malnutrition and body pain. "With proper rest and medicine, he'll recover," the doctor said. Leisel thanked him sincerely. The doctor gave her a strange look. "How could things have gotten so bad that you'd let a child suffer like this?" She quickly clarified. "We didn't starve him. He was like this when I found him. The important thing was that he would live." And yes, he was the main character. Even now, just wiping the dirt from his face, she could see a glow returning to his cheeks. She couldn't understand how such a small child had ended up like this. Then she remembered the backstory. Lapel's father, Duke Hylos's son, had fallen in love with a commoner. They lived together happily, even having Lapel before they were married. The Duke opposed the union, of course, but after his death, they finally wed. Tragically, they were killed in an accident on the way home. Lapel, the only survivor, had hidden himself in a garbage dump. Lizelle's joy faded. She had been so focused on the reward money, she hadn't stopped to think about the child himself. He had just lost both his parents. She felt a pang of guilt and considered apologizing when he woke up. But in the end, she decided not to say anything. They wouldn't see each other again after she got her reward. In the novel, the Duke had immediately recognized Lapel and doted on him. He'd take good care of the boy. There was no need for her to worry. Later, the man from the estate brought Lapel to the Duke. "This boy is your nephew," he said. "Just look at the hair and eyes. Only members of the Hyllos family have those features." The Duke studied the child, then nodded. "Yes, he looks exactly like my late son." The man smiled nervously and mentioned something about the reward, but the Duke's piercing gaze made him fall silent in fear. Still, the Duke did reward him, for his effort, if not for his greed. "Put it all on the table," he'd told the butler. He had even brought Lapel's favourite juice, and he wanted to make sure every coin of the promised money was there. Meanwhile, the man gave the boy a glass of what he claimed was the best juice in the world. The boy took a sip, but before he could react, the Duke's expression darkened. Furious, the Duke stood up. "How dare you lie to me?" he barked. "You think I wouldn't notice? This is your child, isn't it?" His voice echoed through the hall. The Duke wasn't fooled. "You're not the only clever one here. You thought I'd fall for it just because he's young and pitiful? I have to check every child now because of people like you, people who think the Duke can be deceived." Disgusted, the Duke called the guards and ordered them to throw the man out. "I don't want trash like that anywhere near my estate," he muttered. If only he knew what the real boy looked like, this would be much easier. Back at the mansion, Liesel's parents were in complete shock when she told them the child was Lapel Hyllos. Her father stared at the boy, stunned. "Isn't this the same child who disappeared after the accident?" Leisel explained calmly. "I found him unconscious and brought him here. He needs help." But her father frowned and turned to his wife. "He can't be our grandson. Liesel's only 20. Leisel didn't understand why they immediately jumped to such a conclusion. "I'm not saying he's ours," she said. "As soon as he recovers, he'll be taken to the Duke." She asked them not to block the way and requested Dalai to check the boy's condition. It was time for her parents to leave the room. Her mother, meanwhile, gave her a bundle of clothes. Liesel's childhood clothes. Marcin had brought them down from storage. Leisel was surprised. "They've kept all my old things so carefully." It made her realize how deeply her parents loved her. How did such kind people end up with a daughter like the one I replaced? Just then, the boy began to stir. Leisel approached him gently. "How are you feeling?" she asked softly. She placed a hand on his forehead. His fever was gone. The boy looked at her, eyes wide, and whispered, "Mum." Leisel smiled sadly. "I'm not your mother," she said. His expression crumpled, and tears welled in his eyes. Where's my mum? Where's my dad? It hit her then. He didn't remember. The trauma must have caused him to lose his memory. He couldn't even recall their faces. It was far too much for a child. You don't have to cry, Leisel said, picking him up in her arms. Everything will be okay, I promise. Your family is waiting for you. Once you're better, we'll go see them. The boy blinked at her. You're not my family? She shook her head gently. I'm just Leisel. He repeated her name softly, and she smiled. And you are Lapel Heol. I'll call you Lapel, okay? The boy nodded, calmer now. His tears had stopped. Leisel could already tell he was a clever and sweet child. All you need to do now is get better, she said. What do I have to do to get better? He asked. It's simple, she replied. Eat your medicine and your rice. But first she needed to clean him up. Time for a bath, she said. I only wiped you with a towel earlier, but you still smell like, well, trash. Lapel looked horrified. I don't want to bathe. You need to if you want to grow up healthy, she said patiently. The duck-shaped tub was already prepared, and she carefully checked the water temperature before helping him in. Lapel shrieked at first, splashing and protesting, but eventually she coaxed him into the water. Afterward, wrapped in a towel, he looked much better, clean and almost glowing. You're very cute, she said. You're saying that just to flatter me. He pouted. Leisel laughed. All right, I won't praise you unless you really deserve it. When it was time to eat, Lapel sulked again. I don't want to eat any more. So Leisel used the classic airplane trick. Here comes the plane, she said, zooming the spoon toward his mouth. To her relief, Lapel giggled and opened wide. She managed to land the spoonful of rice perfectly. He liked it. And that made her smile. After the second spoonful, Lapel paused and asked, What's an aeroplane? Leisel smiled and gave a simple explanation. It's like a carriage that flies through the sky. Lapel's eyes lit up with wonder. He was completely delighted by the idea, giggling as the spoon airplane flew toward his mouth. But as she watched him, the main character felt a sudden wave of doubt. What am I doing? She thought. She had planned to hand him over to the Duke as soon as he recovered, yet here she was feeding him, playing games, and watching over him like he was her own. Earlier, Lapel had refused to bathe, saying the water made him feel like he couldn't breathe. Now she understood. He must have been trapped underwater during the accident. The cart must have fallen into a river or lake, and this tiny boy had somehow survived it. He was only 5. Leisel's heart ached. What kind of fate has this child endured? He was so small, so fragile, and yet he'd lived. And not just lived, but smiled, laughed, and asked curious questions. How could a child who had suffered so much still be so sweet and smart? She couldn't understand it, and she couldn't ignore it either. Such a boy deserves love, she thought. He shouldn't be left alone. Leisel made a quiet decision. Until he was safely in the Duke's care, she would take responsibility for him. She would protect him. Come on, she said gently. Let's go meet your grandparents. Far away, in a cold, shadowy place, a masked man lashed out at his subordinates. He still hadn't found the boy's body. He needed it, for reasons only he knew. Back at the estate, Leisel reassured Lapel. Don't be scared, she said. My parents don't bite. She brought him to meet her mother and father, who were immediately enchanted by him. My goodness, her mother said, kneeling down. How can such a cute little creature exist? Lapel looked up at her, startled, then turned to Leisel and whispered, There's another you standing over there. Leisel laughed. That's my mother. That's why she looks like me. Her father chuckled and stepped in to say hello, but Lapel leaned close to Leisel and whispered, That one definitely isn't you. I don't know how to explain it. Soon, her mother clapped her hands and invited everyone to the table before dinner got cold. Leisel encouraged Lapel. You can call him Grandpa, okay? Lapel beamed. He was so excited to eat on his own, but Leisel noticed something. You're not eating your carrots, she pointed out. He frowned. You have to eat everything to grow up strong, she said. Even the carrots. You're a mean laddie, Lapel muttered with a pout. Her mother laughed and turned to the Baron. Do you remember? Our daughter was the same. She never touched carrots. And don't forget the bell peppers, her father added. Leisel groaned. Why are you bringing that up now? Lapel giggled as he watched the way his grandfather ate, mimicking him for fun. Then he leaned over and whispered, Can you ask him to be a little quieter? That night, as Leisel tucked him into bed, she whispered, Sweet dreams. I'll see you in the morning. But Lapel clutched her sleeve. Don't go. She paused. Are you in pain? He shook his head. That wasn't it. She suddenly remembered. He had spent so much time in a filthy, terrifying dump. Of course he didn't want to be alone. You want me to sleep here, with you? She asked. He nodded. So she climbed into bed beside him. And in the quiet darkness, Leisel held him close, gently promising herself that she'd stay for as long as he needed her. Afterward, she decided to sleep beside him, and the boy fell asleep right away. Things were getting complicated. The more attached she became, the harder it would be to hand him over to the Duke. The next morning, Lapel happily showed his grandparents a drawing he had made. With excitement, he pointed out each person. Grandpa, Grandma, Leisel, and Marchand. They were all overjoyed. He is a genius, her father said proudly, a pure artist. Even the butler was stunned. He drew me too? They'd spent so much time together lately that none of them wanted to let him go. When Leisel asked them to stop clinging, they begged for one more day. But she stood firm. We have to think about his real family too, she said. They're worried sick. Lapel, however, was thrilled. He thought they were going to his home. Leisel didn't correct him. She was glad he had recovered faster than expected. If he had stayed any longer, her heart might have broken, and that would make it even harder to give him up in exchange for a reward. I need the money, she reminded herself. Just forget about him afterward. The butlers at the Duke's estate finally allowed them entry. Leisel was stunned by the sheer size of the garden. What's that? Lapel asked, pointing at something shooting into the air. That's a fountain, she replied. He was awestruck. This house was much bigger than Leisel's. The girl had known the Duke was rich, but this mansion screamed obscene wealth. A well-dressed butler greeted her and said he would go fetch the Duke. It would only take a moment. While they waited in the grand reception room, Lapel whispered, He's a really handsome butler. Leisel was too nervous to reply. The luxury of the mansion made her feel strangely small. Lapel noticed. Are you okay? He asked. She forced a smile. Of course, everything's fine. A few minutes later, the Duke entered. Sorry to keep you waiting, he said, introducing himself as Chester. He was, in a word, stunning. Tall, refined, and sharply dressed, his appearance was almost unfair. Too much beauty for one man, Leisel thought. Mother Nature really went all out on this one. Without thinking, she muttered, He's so hot. Then froze. Did I just say that out loud? She panicked. Hopefully he didn't hear it. Lapel, confused, tugged on her sleeve. Is he hot like food? Does that mean he's tasty? Leisel nearly choked. Murphy's Law really only applies to time travellers, she thought. This is a set-up. The butler gently interrupted to say they could begin discussing matters now. Leisel quickly reminded Lapel to stay quiet while she spoke to his uncle. The butler left to prepare refreshments, and Leisel apologised for not introducing herself earlier. I'm Baron Frozen's daughter, she said. And this child is the one you've been searching for." She turned to Lapel and encouraged him. "Go on, say hello." Lapel stepped forward and politely greeted the Duke. Leisel noticed the intense way the Duke was staring. It was obvious. This boy was his nephew. In a separate room, the butler confirmed to the Duke that the young woman waiting for him was, indeed, Baron Frozen's daughter. The Duke narrowed his eyes. Another waste of time? Rumours about her had reached him, rumours that she lived a life of luxury and had nearly bankrupted her family. She must have found this child somewhere and brought him here for a reward, he thought coldly. The butler didn't argue, but said, "It's possible, but we must be certain." After that, the Duke told the butler he would speak to the woman himself. The butler was puzzled by his master's decisiveness, especially considering what kind of person she seemed to be. The Duke was convinced she was only after the reward to satisfy her own greed. The butler quietly remarked that the previous swindlers had driven his master to despair, people so shameless they would sell their own children for money. It was disgusting. The Duke had vowed never to see such people as human beings again. Leisel wasn't even sure she had imagined it, but Chester had been staring at her with a strange intensity. In his mind, Chester decided this woman was the lowest of the low. No decent person would bring such a skinny, weak child here. He was convinced she had deliberately starved the boy to make her story more believable. Turning to the child, the Duke asked, "Is it true? Are you Leland Halos?" Lapel nodded. "Yes. Leisel told me that's my name now." That answer made everything fall into place for Chester. He then asked Leisel where she had found the child. She hesitated. If she told the truth, he might be upset, but better a bitter truth than a sweet lie. Chester assumed she was trying to come up with a more convincing story. "It was the dump," she finally said. Immediately, Chester saw it as a ploy to earn his sympathy. "Who was he there?" he asked coldly. "I don't know," she answered honestly. Lapel added, "Leisel told me I don't remember anything because of the accident." Chester narrowed his eyes. How cunning, he thought. She coached the boy to say that, just to avoid any detailed questions. But he wasn't going to be fooled. He would expose her lies on the spot. "What makes you so sure he's Lapel?" Chester snapped. Leisel was stunned by the hostility in his tone. "He's lost his memory. He doesn't even remember his name, so how could you possibly know he's my nephew?" she responded angrily. "Because you told me you were looking for a boy with black hair and red eyes. I brought you exactly that. And this is the thanks I get?" Chester was convinced she was just another fraud, but her confidence unsettled him. Why is she so sure of herself? Now Leisel understood the coldness in his gaze. He didn't believe her. He thought she was lying. Forget it, she thought bitterly. No man this rude should be allowed to look that good. The two stared each other down, locked in a silent but intense battle. "They're playing a staring game," Lapel observed cheerfully. "I'm rooting for Leisel." At that moment, the butler knocked on the door, and when he saw the two of them still glaring at each other, he paused in confusion. "I apologize for interrupting," he said, "but I have something urgent to report." Chester sighed. "What now?" "There's been an accident," the butler whispered. "A shelf collapsed, and all the bottles of magic dispelling potion were shattered." Chester was horrified. "There's nothing left?" "I've already ordered more," the butler replied. "But the ingredients are rare. It will take at least a month for them to arrive." Chester clenched his jaw. "Without the potion, I can't expose this fraud right now," the butler cautiously suggested. "Perhaps, for now, it would be best to send the lady home?" Turning to Leisel, Chester apologized stiffly. "Unfortunately, I won't be able to issue the reward until next month." Leisel blinked. "Are you saying you think I'm a fraud?" "There have been similar cases," he admitted. "So yes, I'm suspicious. Caution is wise." She swallowed her pride. Your caution may be understandable, but saying that to my face is still incredibly rude. She didn't know what kind of man he was. But one thing was clear. She didn't want to see him again. It's time for us to leave, she said curtly. She told Lapel it was time to go and asked the Duke to contact her once the potion arrived. But Chester stopped her. Leave the child here, he said. Leisel turned back, stunned. Excuse me? I meant you can go, but leave him. Lapel shrank back in fear. Chester's status as his uncle was undeniable, but he clearly didn't believe it himself. And now he was asking her to leave the boy behind? No, Leisel said firmly. I won't do that. Chester assumed she was after the reward. If you're truly honest, he said, then I swear on my name that I will repay you. But I must ask you to leave the child. That's not the point, Lizelle snapped. I'm responsible for him until you accept him as your nephew. She turned to leave, Lapel clinging to her hand. The conditions here are far better than in your home, Chester said. Why don't you want to leave him here? Are you saying the conditions in my house are bad? She shot back. Then she knelt and asked Lapel directly, Do you want to stay here or come home with me? I want to go to Grandma and Grandpa's, he said without hesitation. Leisel stood. You heard him. Chester was livid. If you take him now, you'll get nothing, he warned. But the butler stepped in. Please, wait, he said. If you leave now, it may be dangerous for both of you. Leisel looked at him, confused. The butler lowered his voice. The Halos family has many enemies. In the original story, there were constant assassination attempts and conspiracies. If rumors spread that you're hiding a child of the Halos family, innocent people could get hurt. He looked at her solemnly. Please, consider this carefully. It could be traumatic for the boy. Still, the Duke was determined to expose her lie. He wanted to see her continue pretending that her words and actions were sincere. Chester believed that it wasn't enough to simply brainwash a child. You also had to appear genuinely caring. The level of calculation involved astonished even him. You're having trouble deciding, the Duke added. You may stay here with him for the month. Leisel was so surprised she had to ask him to repeat himself. The butler, too, thought he had misheard. She was given a room in the mansion. The boy was absolutely delighted. His room was spacious and beautiful. Leisel admitted, it was all very lovely. The butler told her that he had already informed her family that she would be staying with them, so she didn't need to worry. He introduced himself as Ran. Leisel then asked if she could request a carriage for the next morning. She needed to return home briefly to pack her things and explain the situation to her parents in more detail. Lapel doesn't like waking up alone, she added, so I have to be back before he wakes up. That means I need to leave early. Ran promised to handle everything properly. Internally, however, he was skeptical. As Mr. Chester said, she really is a magnificent swindler. She's even keeping up the act in front of him. Ran believed she would fall for the luxury of the mansion and take the bait. After all, it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. He resolved to report her every move to his master. Still, the butler couldn't help but wonder why his master was so fixated on her. That night, Leisel asked Lapel why he wasn't asleep yet. The night sky is really beautiful, he said. I want to have a star from it. Leisel smiled. We can't just take stars. We'd get caught. Lapel's face fell. But I really want one. Feeling sorry for him, Leisel decided to play along. Well, I did catch a star, she said, holding out her empty hands. The boy's expression fell again. There's nothing there. Of course there is, she insisted. All the stars in the world are in your eyes. Lapel's eyes lit up. Really? I can see them, and there are stars in your eyes too. Her heart ached. This little one, he's making me melt completely. She couldn't help but laugh. Now that we've caught the stars, Lapel said, let's sleep. Everything had gone wrong that day, but she still had to take care of the boy. In the morning she was so tired she fell asleep in the carriage. A sudden jolt from the carriage hitting a stone woke her up. She had gone home early that morning, exhausted. Convincing her father to let her leave for an entire month had been incredibly difficult. Still, she wanted to return quickly and rest properly. She told the coachman to stop for a moment and stepped out. "I'll be back soon," she said. As expected, the market was busy. There were stalls selling everything, from magic tools to food and trinkets. She guessed there must be decorations with stars too. Finally, she found it. Real stars may be mortal and out of reach, but this would do. She was certain Lapel would be thrilled. Then she spotted it. A beautiful glass ornament, shimmering like a captured star. He'll love this. But just as she was about to approach it, she ran into the Duke. The butler, Ran, was also surprised to see him. "We've already prepared the carriages, sir," he informed the Duke. "Then let's go," Chester replied curtly. Ran hesitated, then asked, "Are you sure you want to go there personally, sir?" "I'm just fulfilling someone's request," the Duke answered. Rand hoped this trip would be worth it, that the man really had useful information. Still, he knew the truth would only come out at a face-to-face meeting. Gretzky had also reminded the Duke to finish his business quickly. There was still a scheduled meeting with the elders. Rand sighed. Since the master would be passing through the market, he just hoped he wouldn't get distracted. Afterwards, the gentleman asked, "What about the woman and the child?" "The boy is sleeping, and the Ms. left early this morning to visit her house," Ran replied. Ran then snapped. "Stop indulging her, and stop buying those magic balls. We already have more than enough." Chester was running late. It was time to move. Rowan tried to get his attention, asking not to be ignored, but no one listened. Suddenly he remembered his brother's words, how his son loved stars. "I watch the night sky," his brother had once said, and he smiled with such sweetness. That smile could touch anyone's heart. Rowan had believed that one day his brother would be able to see that smile too. Chester had never thought those would be his brother's final words. He was probably still worrying about his son, even now. "Don't worry, Leon," Chester thought. "I'll take care of Lapel's happiness." But first, he had a few minor problems to deal with. He'd assumed Leisel was still at home, but she appeared just then, saying she had finished her errands and had stopped by on her way back. Chester told her to take her hand off him and walk around as she pleased. Leisel blinked, confused. She had touched him first. The saleswoman interrupted, praising their excellent taste. "This magic ball glows when you press the button. It's the last one. We've nearly sold out." Leisel decided she had to get it for Lapel. "I touched it first," she said firmly. "We touched it at the same time," Chester argued. Thinking fast, Leisel teased him, hinting at his fondness for collecting cute trinkets. He admitted it was a nice hobby. Just then, a child's voice piped up. "Mum, Dad, look! Auntie and Uncle are fighting over a toy." Leisel had her pride, but she wasn't backing down now. She looked around and guessed the voice belonged to Ran. Taking advantage of Chester turning away, she quickly snatched the ball from his hands and told the shopkeeper she'd buy it. Chester was indignant, but the victory was hers. Leisel thought it was a beautiful day. Chester observed how happy she looked. "It's just a toy," he thought. "She's not a child. Is she really happy over something so small?" He found himself doubting his assumptions. Could a woman obsessed with luxury find joy in something so simple? But he almost believed her act. Leisel called to him, telling him to hurry up. Even her innocent smile, he told himself, was part of the deception. "I'm coming," Chester said coldly. She thought he was rude and turned away. Suddenly, shouts rang out. People were warning her to move. She didn't even have time to finish her thought before she noticed a carriage speeding straight toward her. A crowd gathered. The coachman apologized. The horses had gone wild. People asked if she was okay. "I'm alive," Leisel said dazedly. Chester's voice came from beneath her. "If you're alive, could you please get off me?" She realized that when she'd turned around, he had stepped in front of her, and she had fallen onto him. Thanks to him, she wasn't injured. She thanked him and joked, "I must be heavy." "It's good we weren't hurt," was all the Duke said. Chester approached the man whose carriage had caused the chaos. "You dropped these boxes. They look heavy. I'll help." Leisel watched. "He's definitely not the man of my dreams, but he seems like a good person." Noticing a cut on her hand, likely from the fall, she went over and mentioned that his hand was injured too. Chester turned away. "It's none of your business." Leisel felt like a fool for thinking well of him. He's nothing like me. He's not honest. But he did help people, and maybe that counted for something. She continued her shopping, buying the magic ball and a few other small gifts for Lapel. In the end, she had 2 boxes full. She felt satisfied. "We didn't buy anything for Lapel, and he's the one who invited us as guests," she mused. "If the Duke doesn't mind spending money, why shouldn't we get him something nice?" Back in the carriage, she thought maybe she should have gone into an expensive shop just to empty the Duke's wallet a bit more. The carriage suddenly stopped. Curious, she asked the coachman what happened. "Basin's carriage broke down. A wheel came off. They can't go further. Lady Frozen is heading to the Hertz mansion," he added. "You'll be travelling together." Leisel sighed. Should I even try to talk to someone so rude? She asked the Duke if he wanted to ride with her. He replied calmly, "Go ahead, I'll wait here." "Just as I thought," she muttered, saying goodbye. But the servant stopped her. "Please wait." The servant again asked the Duke to ride with the lady. Chester finally agreed, remembering the nobleman's words. He had to return quickly for a meeting. Leisel had said she needed to get back before Lapel woke up. There wasn't time to waste. They rode together, both clearly unhappy. The carriage was crowded, so they sat opposite each other. With every bump, their bodies touched. Leisel nearly suffocated and was baffled by his long legs taking up all the space. Each jolt made the situation worse. Chester tried folding his legs, but that only made his knee bounce more. Leisel didn't understand why he didn't sit like before. She had no space left. Chester, annoyed by her pushing his legs, thought, "At least I'm trying to think of her comfort. She only thinks about herself." She wanted him to sit properly again. She's such a cheater, he thought. The carriage turned suddenly, and Leisel began to fall. She was furious. But Chester wasn't even paying attention. He was staring out the window. Of course, she thought, short legs, I'll just have to endure it. She wanted to sleep, but found it impossible. Eventually, though, she lay down and managed to fall asleep. Chester was shocked. She's actually sleeping, after everything. He looked at her sleeping face. At times like this, she looks like an innocent child. Then his mind drifted somewhere he didn't want it to go. He quickly composed himself. "I know better than anyone that you can't judge someone by their appearance or their clothes." He remembered being beaten once for interrupting a nobleman. His brother defended him, saying Chester was still a child. But their father had snapped. "Leon, don't interfere." A father should love his child more than anyone, but he acted like a cruel bastard, Chester recalled bitterly. That's why you should never jump to conclusions about people. Meanwhile, the lady was still sleeping, and the gentleman had started to suspect that she was only pretending. But then, quite suddenly, she fell headfirst against the carriage window with a loud thud. Chester was shocked. How had she not felt that? The impact had been loud enough to make him wince. They had hit a rocky stretch in the road, and he was beginning to worry she might be tossed around the carriage. Acting on instinct, he reached out to catch her head before it could hit anything again, telling himself it was just a reflex. To his surprise, she clung to his hand and murmured, "Mummy," in her sleep. Chester blinked, bewildered. What kind of strange woman is this, he thought. She's completely eccentric, nothing more. Meanwhile, back at the estate, the servants were struggling to calm Lapel. The boy was crying, calling for Leisel in distress. One of the maids knelt beside him, gently explaining that she would return soon. Just then the butler arrived and asked what was going on. The maid quickly reported, "He didn't see Miss Leisel when he woke up, sir. We told him she would be back soon, but he's inconsolable." The butler was surprised. It seemed the child had already made several loops around the living room in search of her. The staff apologized, saying they were quite busy at the moment but would give a full report later. Ran, observing from nearby, joked, "I believed in them. That's why she promised to come back before he woke up." Peering out the window, he noticed a carriage arriving. His face lit up. She's back. The boy will calm down now. Inside the carriage, the Duke was still holding Liesel's head, trying not to draw attention. The moment the butler opened the carriage doors, Chester quickly let go and shifted to look out the window. Ran stared at the scene, confused. "What happened to your carriage? Why are you two returning together?" Chester replied calmly, "The wheel broke. We hit some rocks and had to come back together." Just then, Leisel stepped out of the carriage, looking dazed and rubbing her head. "I'm fine," she said with a groan. "Probably just bumped around a few times while I was sleeping." The Duke raised an eyebrow. "You were fine when you hit your head, but the moment you wake up, suddenly everything hurts?" He decided it was best to ignore this insidious woman until the potion arrived. As he stepped inside, the master of the house was taken aback to see Lapel running frantically, the servants chasing after him. Leisel was taken aback when she saw the boy immediately rush into her arms. Lapel began to cry, accusing her of being cruel and expressing that he didn't understand why she had left him alone. Liesel's heart ached for him. The butler observed how deeply attached the boy was to his mistress, but the gentleman, Chester, reminded him not to let his guard down until they had all the facts. If anyone noticed anything suspicious, they were to report it immediately. As the boy clung to Leisel, the servant suggested that she leave her luggage behind, but Leisel insisted on handling it herself. She was exhausted and longed to rest, but first she needed to calm the boy down. Leisel approached him and asked why he was crying when she was there. Lapel sat sobbing, pleading with her not to abandon him. Leisel, perplexed, explained that she hadn't left him, she had just been away on business. The boy kept repeating that if she left him again, he would be alone. He then mentioned having to return to the dump, which made Leisel feel ashamed. She hugged him tightly, reassuring him that she would never, ever leave him alone. Lapel asked if she was being sincere, and Leisel promised that she was. She then asked him to wait for a moment while she went to the gifts. Leisel told Lapel that if she were leaving, she wouldn't have bothered to buy him a present. She asked him to hold the magic ball for now, and closed the curtains. The boy was confused, especially as the room was growing darker. Leisel wanted to show him something special. She asked Lapel to watch carefully as she pressed a button on the ball. Instantly, the ball began to sparkle, and the room filled with twinkling stars. "These are real stars," Leisel said. The boy was mesmerized, his face lighting up in awe. "These are your stars now, Lapel," she continued. "This is your home, and no one will ever drive you away." The boy, overjoyed, pressed himself against her. Though they would part soon, Leisel wanted to keep this promise to him. Yet, deep down, she knew she couldn't keep it forever, and that made her feel guilty. Meanwhile, the woman who had taken the boy was now in the Duke's mansion. The masked man asked if they were sure it was the same boy. The servants confirmed that he had black hair and red eyes. The woman, they noted, was the Baron's daughter. The masked man froze. "Is this the vain girl we've been talking about?" he asked. He then turned to the servants and sighed. "Is that all you found out? You've had all this time and this is what you've come up with? I could have learned more from gossip." Furious, he quickly called Hazen and ordered him to dispose of the trash. The servants begged for mercy, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. Hazen asked what the plan was now, and the gentleman responded, We'll start with the magic sphere. Ran, looking on, noted, from what we've learned, the accident wasn't an accident at all. The target was Leon himself. Chester slammed his hand on the table in frustration. Who would dare do such a thing? He then asked about the list of suspects. The butler explained that there were too many enemies within the family, making it difficult to narrow it down. It would help if we had testimony from the only surviving witness, Lapel, he added. The butler had no idea where his master was headed, but Chester said he needed to see the Knight's commander. Ran was surprised. You're going, personally? He asked, before requesting that Chester wait in case he needed to be called. The gentleman, however, said he wanted to get some fresh air and asked the butler to bring Warden. Maybe someone holds a grudge against me, but I don't remember having any enemies, Chester mused. I need to find the culprit and learn the truth. As Chester passed by the servants, he overheard one of the maids asking another if she was afraid of the Duke. They say he might have killed his older brother to take the title, she whispered, shuddering at the thought. It's a terrifying possibility. Another maid scolded them, warning, keep quiet, the walls have ears. The conversation shifted to the assumption that Chester had killed his brother for the title of Duke. Killing your own brother for power is a mockery of family, one of them said. He needs a scapegoat to clear his name of this fratricide. The Knight Commander noticed Chester's arrival and immediately assumed something had happened. Chester ordered him to assemble a reconnaissance team of the best knights. When the commander asked what they should be looking for, Chester silently handed him a piece of paper. The commander read it, disbelief evident on his face. Is this true? He asked. Chester nodded, and the knight agreed to carry out the task. Take Warden with you, Chester added. I need her help on this. The gentleman then told the butler he could leave. I need to be alone for a while, he said. Chester sat on a bench and stared at the sky, feeling the weight of his pent-up anger. The rustling of the leaves around him provided a slight sense of calm, so he decided to stay there for a bit longer. Suddenly he heard the voice of the boy and assumed they were playing nearby, but he still wanted some peace. It was too noisy. Chester thought, we need to find somewhere quieter. Meanwhile, the lady and the boy were playing with the magic ball when Leisel was startled to see the gentleman there. She quickly apologized for disturbing him, explaining that the boy had simply misjudged his strength, which was why the ball had flown all the way over. She couldn't quite understand the look on his face. Chester calmly passed the ball back to her, but Leisel noticed something disturbing. The same wound he had sustained because of her, and it seemed like it hadn't been treated. This worried her. She asked if he had treated the wound, pointing out that if he hadn't, he could get tetanus. The Duke, seemingly unfazed, didn't understand what that was, especially with how serious and angry she seemed. He waved it off, saying it didn't matter and that he'd take care of it later. But Leisel insisted he had to treat it in front of her. If you get sick, I'll feel guilty, she said firmly. The gentleman continued to downplay it, claiming everything was fine. Turning to the maid, Leisel asked her to leave Lapel with Kay and bring the first aid kit. Chester noticed how quickly she was giving orders, and it seemed like she was trying to hurry him away. He couldn't help but feel like she couldn't stand being around him for even 5 minutes. Leisel, noticing this, said, If you think I'm happy to be around you, it's not true. I feel guilty about the scar, not to mention the possibility of you getting ill. I don't want to sit here idly while you risk getting worse. The maid returned with the first aid kit, and Leisel thanked her before preparing to treat the wound. Chester, observing her, realized she was quite a restless woman. Leisel, however, was determined that he wouldn't think she was trying to confuse him. Sitting there like a good boy, Chester surprised her, but Leisel didn't want to be the one to back down. If he didn't want her help, then he'd have to treat it himself. No one needed tetanus here. Meanwhile, Lapel had grown tired of waiting and was ready for bed. Leisel, turning to him, asked, Are you ready for bed? The boy nodded, mentioning he had already put on his pajamas. Leisel smiled, praising him for his independence. Then let's wrap ourselves in a blanket and get some rest, she said. Lapel smiled back, wishing her a good night. As she tucked him in, he suddenly asked, "When will we go back?" Lizelle was surprised and asked, "Where do you want to go back to?" He explained he meant his grandparents' house. Leisel agreed, but only if he promised to eat well, play, and grow strong. She didn't understand why the boy was so sad, and in that moment she wondered if it was because he had bad taste. But the 5-year-old sighed heavily, his small shoulders slumping in front of her. Leisel didn't want to lie to him, but she couldn't promise when they would return. However, she knew she needed to distract him somehow. "Would you like to take a walk around the city?" she asked. "We can make it a tour, and we'll go to a shop with sweets and toys." The boy's eyes lit up, and he eagerly agreed. They quickly decided to get ready, but first they needed to get Chester's permission. Leisel went to Chester's office, unsure of how he would respond. She suspected he would forbid the walk, thinking it could be dangerous. Even when they simply walked through the garden, Kay and Tia always accompanied them. Leisel had grown tired of this constant supervision. She tried to figure out how to ask for time off so they could have some privacy. The butler met her in the corridor and asked if she had business with Chester or if she was afraid of disturbing him. He reassured her that she didn't need to worry. Leisel told him she would be entering Chester's office, and when the butler said that Chester would never allow it, she decided to press on. She knew he was stubborn, but she couldn't just give up. After all, she had promised the boy. She argued that it was very important for him to explore the world at his age, but Chester insisted that if there was nothing urgent to do, they should stay at home. Leisel noticed the bandage on his hand and pointed it out, commenting that he had treated it himself. The butler was surprised to see his master wounded. Leisel noted that Chester had torn the skin off his arm. Chester dismissed it as just a scratch, but he admitted that he was worried about getting tetanus, so he had treated the wound. The butler asked what tetanus was, and Chester, flustered, admitted that he wasn't sure but had treated it anyway. He quickly changed the subject, telling the butler they should focus on more important matters. Leisel, turning to the butler, asked, "What's typical of our Duke?" She had seen how horrified Chester was when she took his hand, not even knowing if it was due to his nobility or just his pride.